They say money talks, but in the world of the ultra-rich, silence is the loudest sound of all. Arthur Sterling was a man who thought his bank account gave him the right to treat human beings like furniture. He walked into the city's most exclusive restaurant expecting a coronation. He ended up getting a funeral for his reputation. And it didn't take a lawsuit, a punch, or a scene. All it took was one exhausted waitress, a spilled drop of wine, and 7 words that froze the blood of a billionaire. Watch closely. You are about to witness the moment a wolf realized he was trapped in a cage with a lioness. The rain in Manhattan didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. But up here on the 54th floor of the Spire building, inside the hallowed halls of L'Obsidian, there was no rain. There was only climate-controlled perfection, the scent of white truffles, and the soft clinking of crystal that cost more than most people's cars. Maya adjusted her apron in the back service corridor, catching her reflection in the stainless steel of the industrial espresso machine. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a lack of sleep, but the soul-deep exhaustion of being invisible. At 26, Maya had a degree in economics from Columbia that was currently gathering dust and a student loan debt that felt like a physical weight on her spine. Maya, check table 4. Water glasses are at half-mast, hissed Jean-Pierre, the floor manager. Jean-Pierre was a man who believed that an empty water glass was a moral failing equivalent to arson. He was a small man with a moustache, so precisely groomed, it looked drawn on with a sharpie. On it, Jean-Pierre. Maya said, her voice steady. She moved onto the floor of L'Obsidian with the practiced grace of a dancer. That was the job. You weren't a person here. You were a ghost who delivered happiness. You were the hands that poured the vintage Pinot Noir, the arm that placed the Wagyu beef, the shadow that retreated before the guest could even acknowledge your existence. Tonight, the air in the restaurant was tighter than usual. The staff moved with a frantic, vibrating energy. "He's coming!" whispered Clara, the hostess, as Maya passed by the station to grab a water pitcher. Clara's knuckles were white as she gripped the reservation book. "Who?" Maya asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew. "Arthur Sterling," Clara breathed. "He just pulled up downstairs. His security team is already in the elevator." Maya felt a cold stone drop in her stomach. Arthur Sterling, the corporate raider, the man who had made headlines last week for firing 3,000 employees via a pre-recorded Zoom call just so he could boost his quarterly margins by 0.4%. He was a billionaire in the truest, ugliest sense of the word, a man who collected companies like toys and broke them just to see how they worked. "Great," Maya muttered, checking her perfectly pinned hair. "Just what we need on a Tuesday. A sociopath with an unlimited credit limit." "Be careful," Clara warned, her eyes darting to the velvet ropes. "The last time he was here, he made the sommelier cry because the cork smelled like poverty." "Whatever that means." Maya nodded and moved back into the dining room. She had dealt with difficult men before. She had grown up in a house full of volatile genius and crushing defeat. She knew that men like Sterling fed on fear. If you showed them you were afraid, they ate you alive. If you showed them nothing, they eventually got bored and moved on. Or so she hoped. As the elevator doors slid open with a soft ding that cut through the ambient jazz, the restaurant went silent. It wasn't a respectful silence. It was the silence of a forest when a predator steps onto the dry leaves. Arthur Sterling stepped out. Sterling was shorter than he looked on television, but he took up more space. He wore a tuxedo that fit him so well it looked like a second skin midnight blue with a black satin lapel. On his arm was a woman who couldn't have been older than 22, wearing a red dress that was less a garment and more a cry for help. Sterling didn't wait to be greeted. He walked past the host stand, ignoring Clara entirely, and marched into the center of the dining room. He stopped, scanned the room with eyes that looked like chips of flint, and then pointed a thick finger at the best table in the house, table 9, by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Chrysler Building. The problem was, table 9 was occupied. An elderly couple, likely celebrating a golden anniversary, sat there holding hands over a soufflé. Jean-Pierre scurried over to Sterling, bowing so low he looked like he might topple over. "Monsieur Sterling, welcome back to L'Obsidian. We have prepared the private alcove for you, very secluded, very—" "I want that table," Sterling said. His voice wasn't loud. It was a low rumble, like a luxury car idling. He pointed at the elderly couple. "Monsieur, that table is currently—" "I didn't ask what it currently is." Sterling interrupted, not even looking at Jean-Pierre. He was looking at his phone. "I told you what I want. Move them. Comp their meal. Buy them a car. I don't care. I want the view." Maya, standing near the service station, felt her jaw tighten. The arrogance was suffocating. She watched as Jean-Pierre, sweating profusely, approached the elderly couple. She saw the confusion on their faces, then the humiliation as they were asked to move mid-dessert. They gathered their things with trembling hands, shamed in front of the entire elite of New York City. Sterling didn't even watch them leave. He sat down in the warm chair the old man had just vacated and snapped his fingers without looking up. "Clean this. It smells like old people." Maya froze. The cruelty was so casual, it was almost impressive. Jean-Pierre frantically motioned for Maya. "Maya, the table! Reset! Now!" "Vite!" Maya took a breath, locked her emotions behind a wall of professional indifference, and approached the table. She moved quickly, stripping the tablecloth, replacing the silver, polishing the crystal. Sterling was talking to his date, but not with her. He was talking at her. "So I told the board, if you want ethics, go join a non-profit. I'm here to make history. You think Rockefeller cared about feelings? You think Vanderbilt asked permission?" He paused as Maya placed a water glass down. He looked at the glass, then up at Maya. It was the first time he had acknowledged her presence. "You," he said. Maya paused. "Yes, sir. There is a smudge on this glass." Maya looked. The glass was pristine. It had been polished 3 times. "Sir, I believe." "I don't pay for what you believe," Sterling sneered. "I pay for perfection. Take it away. And bring me the wine list. The real one. Not the one you show the tourists." "Of course, sir." Maya took the glass. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She simply removed the offending object. As she walked away, she heard him laugh to his date. "See, you have to train them. They're like dogs. If you don't swat them on the nose early, they think they're people." Maya walked into the kitchen, the glass shaking slightly in her hand. She set it down on the counter with a clack that drew looks from the line cooks. "He's a monster," she whispered to herself. "He's a whale," said Marco, the head chef, not looking up from his searing scallops. "Bill will be 10 grand easy. Just survive it, Maya. Don't let him inside your head." "He's not in my head," Maya said, smoothing her apron. He reminds me of someone." "Yehuher." "A mistake," Maya said darkly. She grabbed the leather-bound reserve wine list, the one kept in a safe, and turned back to the door. She didn't know it yet, but the dinner hadn't even started. Sterling was just warming up. When Maya returned to the table, Sterling was berating his date about her posture. The girl looked like she was trying to shrink into the upholstery. "Wine list, sir," Maya said, presenting the heavy book with 2 hands. Sterling didn't take it. He waved a hand dismissively. "I don't want to read. I want to drink. Do you have the 82 Petrus? Maya nodded. We do, sir. It is an exquisite vintage. We have 2 bottles left in the cellar. Bring them both, Sterling said, and open them immediately. I want them to breathe for exactly 12 minutes before you pour. Both bottles, sir. Did I stutter? Sterling looked at her, his eyes narrowing. Are you deaf or just poor? The insult hung in the air. The tables nearby had gone quiet. Everyone was listening. This was theatre to them. The billionaire versus the help. Maya felt a flush of heat climb up her neck, but her face remained a mask of marble. I will fetch the sommelier, sir. No, Sterling barked. I don't want the sommelier. I want you to do it. You seem like you need the practice. Maybe if you learn how to handle a $5,000 bottle, you won't be waiting tables when you're 40. The cruelty was specific. It was designed to hurt. Maya looked him in the eye. For a fleeting second, the mask slipped. There was a sharpness in her gaze, an intelligence that startled Sterling. He blinked, momentarily confused by the defiance in the eyes of a servant. As you wish, Mr. Sterling, she said. She went to the cellar. Jean-Pierre was hyperventilating near the pass. He wants both bottles of the Petru. That's $12,000. He wants me to open them, Maya said calmly. He wants a show. Do it. Just do whatever he says. Maya retrieved the bottles. They were dusty, heavy, and historic. She carried them to the table on a silver tray. She presented the labels. She cut the foil. She drove the corkscrew in. Sterling watched her like a hawk, waiting for the cork to crumble, waiting for her hand to slip. He wanted her to fail. He wanted to prove that she was incompetent, so he could feel superior. Maya pulled the first cork. Pop, a perfect sound. She pulled the second cork. Pop! She set the bottles down to breathe. 12 minutes, Sterling said, checking his diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe watch. Stand there and wait. If you pour it at 11 minutes and 59 seconds, I send it back. So Maya stood. She stood by the table, hands clasped behind her back, a statue in a black vest. So, Sterling said, ignoring his date and turning his chair to face Maya fully. He seemed amused by her obedience. Tell me, what's your story? Failed actress dropout. Why are you holding a towel for a living? Maya stared at a point just above his left ear. I am working to pay off my student loans, sir. Loans? Sterling scoffed. See, that's the problem with your generation. You borrow money you can't pay back to learn things you can't use. I bet you studied something useless. Art history, gender studies? Economics, sir, Maya said softly, with a focus on hostile corporate mergers and acquisition law. Sterling laughed, a loud barking sound. Economics, and here you are. That's rich, literally. I'm rich and you're here. Let me give you a lesson in economics, sweetheart. The world is divided into those who own the capital and those who are the capital. You are the capital. You are the machinery. You have no leverage. Leverage can change, sir, Maya said. It was a risky thing to say. Sterling stopped laughing. His eyes went cold. Excuse me, I said leverage is fluid. Market conditions shift. Sterling stared at her. The air around the table dropped 10 degrees. Are you talking back to me? I am simply engaging in the conversation you initiated, sir. You don't engage, Sterling hissed, leaning forward. You serve. You are a utility, like a light switch. I flick you on, you work. I flick you off, you disappear. Don't ever forget that. He picked up his fork and tapped it aggressively against the side of his water glass. Ting, ting, ting. My steak, he demanded. Where is my steak? It's been 12 minutes. The wine is ready. The meat should be here. It is coming now, sir, Maya said. Two runners appeared with the plates. They placed a steaming bone-in ribeye in front of Sterling. It was a masterpiece of culinary art. Sterling picked up his knife. He cut into the center of the steak. He stared at the meat. Then slowly, he put the knife down. He looked up at Maya, and a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found the excuse he was looking for. "It's medium," he whispered. "Sir, I ordered medium rare," Sterling said, his voice rising. This is medium." Maya looked at the steak. It was a perfect warm pink center. It was exactly medium rare. "Sir, that is medium rare. The chef is—" "Are you arguing with me?" Sterling stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I said it is medium. It is overcooked garbage. You think because I'm rich, I don't know what I'm eating. You think you can pass off this burnt rubber to Arthur Sterling. Sir, if you look at the gradient of the pink—" "I don't need to look," Sterling shouted. He grabbed the plate. The entire restaurant gasped. Sterling lifted the plate and inverted it. The steak, the sauce, the potatoes, they all slid off and landed with a wet splat right onto Maya's shoes. The sauce splattered up onto her pristine white apron. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Sterling dropped the empty plate onto the table. It spun and rattled before settling. "Clean it up," Sterling said, sitting back down and adjusting his cuffs. "And then get me the manager. I want you fired. Tonight. I want you out of this building before I finish my dessert." Maya stood there. She looked down at the ruined food on her shoes. She looked at the grease stains spreading on her apron. She felt the eyes of everyone in the room. The pity. The shock. But strangely, she didn't feel shame. She felt a click, like a lock turning over in her mind. She looked up at Arthur Sterling. The fear was gone. The professional mask was gone. Jean-Pierre was running over, apologizing, wringing his hands. "Monsieur Sterling, I am so sorry. 1,000 apologies. Maya, get a towel. Leave, get out. No," Maya said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through Jean-Pierre's panic like a blade. "Excuse me," Jean-Pierre squeaked. Maya stepped over the steak. She moved closer to the table. She was now standing inside Sterling's personal space. "I said no," Maya repeated. She looked Sterling dead in the eyes. Sterling looked amused. "Oh, the light switch is malfunctioning. You're going to make a scene? Go ahead. I love a good tantrum before I crush someone." Maya smiled. It was the same cold smile from the opening hook. "Mr. Sterling," Maya said, her voice dropping to a register that was dangerously calm. "Do you recognize me?" Sterling scoffed. "Why would I recognize a waitress? You all look the same." "Look harder," she said. Sterling frowned. He squinted. There was something, the shape of the eyes, the high cheekbones. "I don't know you," he dismissed. "Now clean up your mess." "My name is Maya," she said. "Maya Bennett." Sterling froze. His hand, reaching for his wine glass, stopped in midair. "Bennett," he whispered. "Does it ring a bell?" Maya asked, tilting her head. "Perhaps if I remind you of a company called Aerotech Dynamics, or maybe a man named Robert Bennett, my father." Sterling's face went from red to a pale, waxy grey. The name Aerotech Dynamics hung in the air like toxic smoke. It was a name that hadn't been spoken in polite society for 5 years, not since the scandal, the bankruptcy and the tragedy that followed. Arthur Sterling blinked, the colour draining from his face, replaced by a mottled, angry red. He slowly lowered himself back into his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He looked at Maya not as a servant anymore, but as a ghost. "Robert Bennett," Sterling muttered, swirling the wine in his glass, though his hand wasn't quite steady. "Bob. I haven't thought about him in years. He was soft, a dreamer. He didn't have the stomach for the big leagues. My father was a genius, Maya said, her voice trembling with a suppressed rage that vibrated through the dining room. He built aerotech from a garage in Queens. He employed 400 people. He treated them like family. And that's why he failed, Sterling spat, regaining his composure. He took a sip of the $12,000 wine. He cared too much. In business, caring is a cancer. I did him a favor, really. I bought his debt, stripped the assets, and sold the patents to the Chinese for a 400% profit. It was a masterclass in efficiency. You destroyed him, Maya said. You manipulated the stock price. You planted false stories in the press about safety violations that didn't exist. You drove the valuation down until you could buy it for pennies on the dollar. And when he tried to fight you, you sued him personally until he lost the house, until he lost everything. Sterling shrugged, a gesture of supreme indifference. It's called leverage, sweetheart. Your father borrowed money he couldn't pay back when the market shifted. I just cleaned up the mess. He took his own life, Maya said. The words were quiet, heavy stones dropped into a deep well. The restaurant was dead silent. Even the jazz trio in the corner had stopped playing. The young woman in the red dress next to Sterling looked like she wanted to vomit. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, inching away from him. Arthur, the girl whispered. Is that true? Shut up, Tiffany. Sterling snapped, not looking at her. He kept his eyes locked on Maya. People die, kid. It's a tragedy, sure. But why are you telling me this? You think I'm going to burst into tears. You think I'm going to write you a check out of guilt. I don't have guilt. I have accountants. He laughed, a cruel, dry sound. So this is it, the grand revenge. The daughter of the great failure. Robert Bennett ends up wiping tables at the place where I eat, just so she can spill steak on my shoes and give me a sob story. Sterling reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a money clip. It was thick with cash. He peeled off 5 $100 bills and threw them onto the table. They landed in the spilled sauce. Here, he sneered. Buy yourself some new shoes, maybe a therapy session. Now get out of my face. You're boring me. Maya didn't look at the money. She didn't move. I didn't end up here by accident, Arthur, she said. Sterling paused. His hand froze halfway to his wine glass. What? I didn't end up waiting tables at L'Obsidian because I failed, Maya said, taking a step closer. The steak sauce on her shoes squelched against the floor, a gritty sound in the silence. I graduated top of my class at Columbia, Arthur. I had offers from Goldman, from J.P. Morgan. I turned them all down. Sterling narrowed his eyes. Why? To work here, she said. Because I knew this was your favorite restaurant. I knew you came here every Tuesday. I knew you requested table 9. And I knew that eventually you would get careless. Sterling laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Careless, I am the most careful man in New York. I have an army of lawyers. I have non-disclosure agreements that are tighter than a submarine door. What could you possibly do? Spit in my soup. You treat people like furniture. Maya said, her voice gaining strength. You treat servers, drivers, and assistants like they are deaf and blind. You have loud conversations on your phone. You review documents on the table. You boast to your dates about deals that haven't been announced yet. Sterling's smile faltered. So I talk business. Everyone talks business. Not everyone talks about Project Icarus, Maya said. The blood left Sterling's face so fast it looked like he'd been slapped. The name of the project hung between them, like a grenade with the pin pulled. What did you say? He whispered. Project Icarus, Maya repeated clearly. The hostile takeover of Solaris Energy. The one that hasn't been announced yet. The one where you're planning to short the stock 3 days before the announcement to trigger a panic sell-off so you can buy the controlling interest for half its value. Which, as you know, is highly illegal. It's market manipulation. It's fraud. It's exactly what you did to my father, but on a federal scale. Sterling looked around the room. He looked at the waiters, the diners, the manager. Suddenly the restaurant didn't feel like a palace. It felt like a cage. "You're lying," Sterling hissed. "You don't know anything. You heard a name. That proves nothing." "I've been working here for 8 months, Arthur," Maya said. "For 8 months, I've served you wine. I've poured your water. I've cleared your plates. And every Tuesday you've gotten drunker and louder. You think because I wear an apron, I don't have a brain. You think because I'm serving you, I'm not listening." She reached into her apron pocket. Sterling flinched, as if he expected a weapon. But she didn't pull out a gun. She pulled out a small black digital voice recorder. Sterling stared at the device in her hand. It was small, innocuous, and utterly terrifying. "Give me that," he demanded, standing up. He knocked his chair over. It clattered loudly to the floor. "Give that to me right now, you little thief." "Sit down, Arthur," Maya said. She didn't shout. She commanded, "I will not sit down, Jean-Pierre." Sterling screamed, his voice cracking. "Jean-Pierre, call the police. This woman is blackmailing me. She is recording private conversations. That is illegal. It's inadmissible. I'll have her arrested." Jean-Pierre. The manager stood by the kitchen door. He looked from Sterling to Maya. He was sweating, his handkerchief balled up in his fist. But he didn't move to call the police. He just stood there looking strangely pale. "Jean-Pierre," Sterling roared. "Are you deaf?" "He can't help you, Arthur," Maya said. "And as for the legality, New York is a one-party consent state. That means as long as one person in the conversation consents to the recording, it's legal. And since you were shouting your crimes loud enough for the staff to hear, there was no expectation of privacy in a public restaurant." "I wasn't talking to you," Sterling yelled. "I was talking to her." He pointed at his date, Tiffany. Tiffany stood up. She looked at Sterling with pure disgust. "Actually," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "you were talking at me, and I consent to the recording." Sterling wheeled around, his eyes bulging. I bought you that dress. I flew you here on a helicopter, and you treated me like a dog the whole time," Tiffany said. She stepped away from him, moving to stand behind Maya. "I hope you rot." Sterling looked at the two women. He was cornered, but Arthur Sterling was a fighter. He was a bully, and bullies always double down when they are threatened. He straightened his tuxedo jacket. He took a deep breath. He channeled all the arrogance, all the money, all the power he had accumulated over 30 years of crushing people. "You think you've won," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "You think a little audio tape scares me? I have judges on my payroll. I have senators on speed dial. I will bury you, Maya Bennett. I will make sure you never work in this city again. I will sue you for slander, for libel, for emotional distress. I will keep you in court until you are so old and poor, you'll wish you had died with your father." He stepped over the spilled steak, encroaching on her space, trying to use his physical size to intimidate her. "You are a waitress," he spat, leaning down so his face was inches from hers. "You are a nobody. You have no money. You have no power. You are an insect fighting a god. Give me the tape, apologize, and maybe I won't destroy your life." The tension in the room was unbearable. A diner at table 4 dropped a fork, and the sound was like a gunshot. Maya looked up at him. She didn't blink. She didn't back down. She waited until he was finished, until his echo died out. Then she delivered the line that would end him. She smiled, a genuine, sharp, terrifying smile. "I'm not the waitress, Arthur. I'm the owner." Sterling froze. His brain tried to process the words, but they didn't fit. "What?" "I said I'm the owner," Maya repeated calmly. "I bought L'Obsidian 6 months ago, using the insurance payout from my father's death and the investments I made betting against your companies." Sterling looked around the restaurant. He looked at Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre straightened his spine. He stopped looking terrified and started looking professional. He nodded respectfully at Maya. "It is true, Monsieur Sterling. Miss Bennet signed the deed in February. She has been running the floor to observe operations." Sterling's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You own..." "I own the restaurant," Maya continued, her voice ringing clear. "Which means I own the security camera footage, the 4K high-definition audio and video feeds from the cameras covering Table 9, the ones we installed specifically to monitor high-value clients." She pointed to a small, discreet dome in the ceiling directly above Sterling's head. A tiny red light blinked steadily. "You haven't just been speaking into my recorder, Arthur," she said. "You've been broadcasting your insider trading scheme to a cloud server that automatically backs up to 3 different secure locations. And guess who else has access to that server?" Sterling felt his knees give way. "No." "The Securities and Exchange Commission," Maya said. "I sent them the link 10 minutes ago while you were letting your wine breathe." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc. Arthur Sterling looked at the ceiling camera. He looked at the spilled steak on the floor. He looked at Maya, the waitress, who had just checkmated him in front of 50 witnesses. "You," he choked out. "You set me up." "I provided the service," Maya corrected. "You provided the crime." Sterling's phone buzzed in his pocket. Then it buzzed again. Then it started ringing continuously. He pulled it out with a trembling hand. The screen lit up. It was his chief legal officer. He ignored it. Another call came through instantly. The Wall Street Journal. "It seems the news is out," Maya said, checking her own smartwatch. "The SEC moves fast when they have a confession on tape. Project Icarus is dead, Arthur, and so is your stock price. I imagine by tomorrow morning, your board of directors will be voting to remove you, if you're not in handcuffs by then." Sterling dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, cracking the screen. He looked at Maya with pure hatred. The civilized veneer was gone. The billionaire mask had slipped off, revealing the cornered animal underneath. "I'll kill you," he whispered. He lunged. It was a desperate, clumsy move. He reached for her throat, his hands clawing at the air. But before he could touch her, a heavy hand clamped onto his shoulder. It wasn't Jean-Pierre. 2 men in dark suits had entered the restaurant from the kitchen service entrance. They moved with the heavy, purposeful gait of federal agents. Arthur Sterling, the first agent, said, spinning the billionaire around. "Get your hands off me!" Sterling screamed, flailing. "Do you know who I am? Arthur Sterling, you are under arrest for securities fraud, insider trading, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." The agent recited, his voice bored and mechanical. He slapped a pair of metal cuffs onto Sterling's wrists. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs was the most satisfying sound Maya had ever heard, better than the pop of the Petrus cork. "This is a mistake," Sterling shouted, as they dragged him toward the door. He was kicking and struggling, his perfectly tailored tuxedo, bunching up, his dignity shredded. "I am Arthur Sterling. I own this city, Maya. You little witch, I'll sue you. I'll burn this place to the ground." The diners watched in awe. Smartphones were out at every table recording the spectacle. Sterling's downfall was being live-streamed to the world. As the agents hauled him past the host stand, Sterling managed to dig his heels in one last time. He looked back at Maya, his eyes wild with desperation. "Why?" he screamed. "Why go to all this trouble? You could have just taken the money." Maya stood amidst the ruin of Table 9. She looked at the man who had killed her father with a spreadsheet. "Because, Arthur," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Some things are more expensive than money, and you just couldn't afford the price of admission." The agents shoved him through the revolving doors and out into the rainy New York night. The flashing blue and red lights of police cruisers washed over the dining room, illuminating the stunned faces of the patrons. Maya stood still for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. She looked down at her ruined apron. Jean-Pierre approached her cautiously. "Mademoiselle Bennet, are you all right?" Maya took a deep breath. For the first time in 5 years, the weight on her chest was gone. The ghost of Robert Bennet could finally rest. "I'm fine, Jean-Pierre," she said. She untied the apron and let it drop to the floor, covering the spilled steak. "What shall we do about the service?" Jean-Pierre asked, gesturing to the room full of shocked diners. Maya looked out at the crowd. They were looking at her with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Comp everyone's meal," Maya said. "Open the cellar, pour the champagne. Tell them it's on the house." "And the Petrus?" Jean-Pierre asked, eyeing the 2 open bottles on Table 9 that Sterling hadn't had a chance to drink. Maya picked up one of the bottles. She poured a glass for herself. She took a sip. It was complex, earthy, and tasted like victory. "Pour a glass for the lady in the red dress," Maya said, nodding toward Tiffany, who was still standing there looking lost. "And then bring a mop. We have a mess to clean up." The revolving doors of L'Obsidian finally came to a stop, though they seemed to vibrate with the residual energy of the chaos. The red and blue strobe lights of the NYPD cruisers faded into the rainy Manhattan night, leaving the dining room in a sudden, jarring quiet. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the stunned vacuum that follows an explosion. 50 diners sat frozen forks, hovering halfway to their mouths. The jazz trio in the corner held their instruments like weapons, unsure if it was safe to play. In the center of the room, Table 9 was a ruin. The white tablecloth was stained with the blood-red map of the spilled Petrus wine and the grease of the discarded ribeye. It looked less like a dinner table and more like a crime scene, which in a legal sense it was. Maya stood amidst the wreckage. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation was beginning to recede, replaced by a physical trembling in her hands. It wasn't fear. It was the sheer biological cost of holding back 5 years of rage. Jean-Pierre, the floor manager, who had spent the last 2 hours vibrating with anxiety, was the first to move. He approached Maya as if she were a wild animal that might bite. "Mademoiselle Bennet," he whispered, his voice cracking. The guests, the police. The press will be here soon. What do we do?" Maya took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of expensive wine and victory. She looked down at her ruined apron, the symbol of her servitude, and slowly untied the knot at her waist. She pulled the fabric free and let it drop onto the pile of mess at her feet. She looked up, and for the first time, the staff saw her not as Maya the server, but as Maya the owner. "Jean-Pierre," she said, her voice steady and projecting to the back of the room. "Turn the music back on. Something upbeat. Open the reserve cellar. I want a bottle of Dom Perignon at every occupied table. If we run out, open the Krug. If we run out of that, open the Cristal." "All of it," Jean-Pierre gasped. That is $50,000 in inventory." Consider it a marketing expense, Maya said dryly. People will talk about tonight for the rest of their lives. I want them to remember the champagne, not just the handcuffs. She turned to the dining room. The patrons were staring at her. Some looked terrified. Others looked like they wanted to applaud. Ladies and gentlemen, Maya announced, her voice ringing clear. I apologize for the interruption to your evening. Mr. Sterling had a prior engagement with federal authorities that he had neglected to mention. Please enjoy the rest of your night on the house. Dessert is on me. For a second there was silence. Then a man at table 4, a hedge fund manager who had likely been bullied by Sterling in the past, started to clap. Then a woman at the window joined in. Within 10 seconds the entire restaurant was erupting in applause. It wasn't polite golf clapping. It was a raucous, cheering ovation. Maya didn't smile. She simply nodded, turned on her heel, and walked toward the kitchen. As the double doors swung shut behind her, the noise of the dining room cut off. The kitchen staff, the line cooks, the dishwashers, the sous chefs were all standing in a line, staring at her. These were the invisible people, the ones Sterling hadn't even deigned to look at. Marco, the head chef, wiped his hands on a towel. He looked at Maya with a newfound respect that bordered on reverence. Is it true? Marco asked. You own the place. Since February. Yes, Marco, Maya said softly. And you've been peeling potatoes and polishing glass with us for 6 months. I needed to know the business, Maya said. And I needed to be close to the shark when he swam into the net. Marco chuckled, shaking his head. Well, boss, you got him. You gutted him? Not yet, Maya said, her eyes darkening. The arrest is just the hook. Now we have to reel him in. The next morning, the sun broke over New York City with a deceptive brightness. Inside Maya's small apartment in Brooklyn, the blinds were drawn, but the glow of 3 computer monitors illuminated the room. She hadn't slept. She had spent the night on the phone with the SEC, her lawyers and the forensic accountants she had hired months ago. On the center screen, the news was playing on mute. The headline on CNBC was flashing in urgent red banners, Sterling Silver Crash Billionaire Arrested in Downtown Sting. The footage of Arthur Sterling being shoved into the back of a police car tuxedo, ripped and face purple with rage, was playing on a loop. It was the most beautiful thing Maya had ever seen. But the real damage was on the left screen. It showed the pre-market trading data. Sterling's holding company Sterling Capital was in freefall. The board of directors, terrified of being implicated in the wire fraud and insider trading charges, had issued a statement at 4:00 a.m., immediately severing ties with their founder. They had thrown him to the wolves to save themselves. Because of Maya's tip-off, the SEC had frozen Sterling's personal assets before he even made bail. His bank accounts, his offshore holdings, his real estate portfolio, everything was locked down. Maya took a sip of cold coffee and watched the numbers turn red. Every percentage point drop was $1 million of Sterling's net worth evaporating. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her lawyer, David. Arraignment is set for 10 a.m. Bail denied. Flight risk. The recording you provided is admissible. He's done Maya. They're talking 20 years minimum. Maya put the phone down. She leaned back in her chair and looked at the photo on her desk. It was an old Polaroid of her father, Robert Bennett. He was standing in front of his first workshop, grease on his face, holding a wrench like a scepter. He looked tired but happy. He can't hurt anyone else, Dad, she whispered to the empty room. He's in a cage. But there was one loose end. At 11:00 a.m., Maya returned to L'Obsidian. The restaurant was closed for lunch. The media circus outside was too intense to open, but the staff was inside prepping for dinner. Maya sat in the small office behind the wine cellar, the deed to the building framed on the wall behind her. She was signing checks for vendors when there was a hesitant knock on the door. "Come in," Maya said. The door opened and Tiffany walked in. The young woman looked drastically different from the terrified prop in the red dress from the night before. She was wearing jeans, a thick sweater, and sneakers. She wore no makeup, and her eyes were puffy, as if she had been crying for hours. She stood in the doorway, clutching her purse. Jean-Pierre said I could come up. Tiffany said, her voice small. "Of course," Maya said, standing up and gesturing to the chair. "Please sit down." Tiffany sat on the edge of the seat. She looked at Maya, really looked at her, searching for the waitress she thought she knew. "I saw the news," Tiffany said. "They're saying he lost everything. They're saying he might die in prison." "He committed serious crimes, Tiffany," Maya said gently. "He destroyed companies. He ruined thousands of lives. My father was just one of them." Tiffany looked down at her hands. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. I met him at a charity gala 3 weeks ago. He was charming. He told me he could help my modeling career. He told me he was a visionary." "He was a predator," Maya corrected. "He picked you because you were young and beautiful, and he thought you were naive. He thought he could use you as a mirror to admire himself in." "I feel so stupid," Tiffany whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I sat there while he treated you like dirt. I let him talk to me like I was an object. I didn't say anything until it was too late." "You spoke up when it mattered," Maya said firmly. "When you gave consent for that recording, you hammered the final nail into his coffin. Without your voice on that tape, his lawyers might have argued it was an illegal wiretap. You didn't just watch Tiffany. You helped take him down." Tiffany sniffled, wiping her eyes. "So what happens now? You're the owner of the hottest restaurant in New York. You're the avenging angel of Wall Street, according to the New York Post." Maya smiled, a genuine tired smile. "The restaurant will survive. Jean-Pierre runs the floor better than I ever could. I have other plans." "Plans?" Maya stood up and walked to the small safe in the corner of the office. She spun the dial, the tumblers clicking rhythmically. She opened the heavy steel door and reached inside. She pulled out the second bottle of 1982 Waitress, the one Sterling had ordered but never drank. The dust of the cellar still coated the dark glass. Maya walked back to the desk and placed the bottle in front of Tiffany. "I want you to have this," Maya said. Tiffany's eyes widened. She stared at the bottle as if it were a bomb. "Maya, that's a $6,000 bottle of wine. Actually, given the provenance and the story attached to it now, it's probably worth 10, Maya said. "Arthur ordered it to show off his wealth. I want you to take it to reclaim yours." "I can't," Tiffany stammered. "Take it," Maya insisted. "Sell it. Use the money to pay your rent or take acting classes or go back to school. Whatever you want. Just promise me one thing." Tiffany reached out her fingers, trembling as she touched the cold glass. "What?" "Don't let men like Arthur Sterling define your worth ever again," Maya said. "They are not gods. They are just men with money. And as we proved last night, money can be lost in a heartbeat." Tiffany stood up. She grabbed the bottle, holding it to her chest like a shield. She looked at Maya, and for the first time she smiled. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "Go," Maya said kindly, "and use the back exit. The paparazzi are vultures." 3 months later. The autumn leaves in Central Park were turning a brilliant fiery orange. The air was crisp, signaling the end of the humidity and the start of the real city season. Maya walked through the iron gates of the cemetery in Queens. It was a quiet place, far removed from the noise of the skyscrapers and the trading floors. She walked the familiar path, the gravel crunching softly under her boots, until she reached the modest granite headstone. Robert Bennett, beloved father and innovator, 1965. 2019. Maya knelt in the grass. She placed a copy of the Wall Street Journal on the grave. The headline read, "Sterling sentenced to 25 years. Assets liquidated to compensate victims." "We did it, Dad," Maya said softly. The wind rustled the trees, a sigh of relief from the world. The class action lawsuit went through yesterday. She continued talking to the stone, as if her father were sitting right there. "The former employees of Aerotech are getting their pensions back, all of them. The patents you developed, I bought them back from the holding company. I donated them to the engineering department at MIT. Your work is going to teach the next generation." She traced the letters of his name with her finger. "I thought that when this was over, I would feel empty," she admitted. "I thought revenge was supposed to be hollow. But it's not. It feels clean. It feels like balance." She stood up, brushing the dirt from her knees. She looked different now. The waitress uniform was long gone. She wore a tailored blazer and carried a leather satchel. She looked like a woman who knew exactly who she was. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen. It was an email from the admissions office of Columbia Law School. Subject orientation schedule. Maya smiled. She wasn't going back to waiting tables, and she wasn't going to be a passive owner of Lobsidian counting receipts in the back office. She had realized something during her battle with Sterling. The law was a weapon. In the hands of men like Sterling, it was a bludgeon used to crush the weak. But in the hands of someone who knew the cost of injustice, it could be a shield. She turned and walked back toward the city. The skyline loomed in the distance, a jagged range of glass and steel. Somewhere in one of those towers there was another Arthur Sterling. Another man who thought he was untouchable. Another bully shouting at a waiter, or firing a mother, or stealing a pension. They thought they were the kings of the jungle. They thought the world belonged to them. Maya tightened her grip on her bag. She had taken down one wolf. She was ready for the rest of the pack. And that is how the dynasty of Arthur Sterling crumbled. It didn't take an army, and it didn't take a miracle. It took the patience of a daughter who never forgot, and the arrogance of a man who never learned. Sterling spent the rest of his life in a 6x8 cell, where the only thing on the menu was regret. Maya Bennett went on to become one of the most feared corporate prosecutors in New York, a nightmare for every corrupt billionaire who thought they were above the law. The story of the waitress and the billionaire teaches us a simple, powerful lesson. The person you treat like nothing today might be the person holding your fate in their hands tomorrow. Hubris is a debt that always comes due, and the interest rate is devastating. I hope you enjoyed this saga of justice served cold. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It helps us bring these stories to life. And if you believe that karma always finds a way, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Join us next time for a story about a landlord who evicted a single mother only to realize she was the judge presiding over his tax evasion trial. Until then, stay humble, stay kind, and remember, the walls have ears, and the waitress might just own the restaurant. Thanks for watching.